And we are live.
Okay, well then, welcome to the July 16th meeting of the Edina Transportation Commission. This meeting is held electronically to comply with the governor's Stay Safe Minnesota order and to ensure the safety of all residents and staff. All members of the commission and staff are participating from their homes or offices. Thanks to those who are watching the meeting via live stream or listening in. This meeting will be posted on the city's website and will be available to the public. If individuals want to correspond with the commission, they should use the online correspondence form found on edinamin.gov. Thanks in advance for your patience as we work to conduct this meeting virtually. Commissioners are reminded to please mute their audio when they're not speaking. We will do our best to continue the meeting if any technical issues should occur. And with that, we'll call the meeting to order. Andrew, you're still doing the roll?
Yes, I am. Commissioner Aller.
Here.
Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Kane.
Here.
Commissioner Lafferty. Commissioner McCarthy.
Here.
Commissioner Plum-Smith. Chair Richmond.
Here.
Commissioner Rothruff.
Here.
Commissioner Shearer. Commissioner Erickson.
Here.
Commissioner Vanell.
Here.
Okay, you have all seen the meeting agenda, I think. Do we have any amendments or additions to that? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve.
I think I heard two of you. Some of you folks I think are pretty, either your audio's turned down real low or something. So did I hear two of you?
I thought I heard Eric move.
Okay. And
He beat me to it, so I changed mine to a second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor of approving the agenda as written, please say aye.
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 Sorry, roll call.
Roll call. Sorry.
That's okay, I forgot.
Commissioner Aller.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Kane.
Aye.
Commissioner Lafferty. Commissioner McCarthy.
Aye.
Commissioner Plum-Smith. Chair Richmond.
Aye.
Commissioner Rothruff.
Aye.
Commissioner Shearer. Commissioner Erickson.
Aye.
Commissioner Vanell. Motion passes.
We have an agenda, and now we get to the meeting minutes from last month's meeting. Are there comments, changes? I do have one. I noticed that Commissioner Kane was listed as absent. Bokar, were you absent or were you late?
I was late, I think. I
That's
was
right.
in there. I think
Okay, that's what I thought.
Thank you.
Yeah, on the first page later on, I have noted where Commissioner Kane arrived.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, sure enough. Any changes? Hearing none, I will take a motion to approve the minutes as written.
I move.
Moved.
I'll second then. Mindy
Okay,
and I are anxious to move us along.
Moved and seconded. Andrew, just a question of technicality. Do you need to continue to call on the members who are absent in the voting?
I guess normally I wouldn't. Admittedly, right now I can't necessarily tell if they join the meeting later. So that's part of the reason why I'm continuing to call. Well,
Okay,
I guess for Kirk and Jill, I don't have to because I know that they're
Right.
going to be absent. But
okay,
in the event that Peter or Matt join us,
you might as well keep saying their names.
yeah.
Real good. Okay,
May I ask another question?
Sure.
Have we now given student commissioners the ability to vote? If so, I am in favor of that, but I know it had been a requirement before that they were non-voting members.
that was my understanding as well. Again, I'd be in favor of it.
And
Well,
does that affect a quorum if that's true?
How about if we keep taking their votes, your votes, Simon and Tayden, and maybe you can check on that, Andrew.
I will. Thank you. But to answer the question, they do not count toward quorum. So in order for the motion to pass, it requires five members of the commission, not including the student members.
Therefore, I like this process that they still get to voice their vote.
Yeah, I do too.
Commissioner Aller,
Aye.
Commissioner Kane,
Aye.
Commissioner Lafferty, Commissioner McCarthy, Chair Richmond,
Aye.
Commissioner Ruthruff,
Aye.
Commissioner Shearer, Commissioner Erickson,
Aye.
Commissioner Vanell.
Aye.
Minutes are approved.
Great. Let's move on then, I think, to the traffic safety report.
Correct.
And we will move into the A items. Andrew, does Nick Baller not, he doesn't come with us. You usually present these. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, A1, we have a request for safety improvements on West 60th Street. 58th Street is closed. Even when it's not closed, there's a high traffic volume and generally high speed on 60th. There is not a speed limit sign for eastbound traffic. There is one stop sign between France and Xerxes, and it's at Chowan. And I'm delighted to see that mill and overlay is anticipated for 2021 and sort of disappointed to see that the sidewalk is not for another 6 years. So the staff recommendation is to install a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit sign for eastbound traffic on West 60th. Comments, questions? I have just a side note, since we will be looking at your draft local speed limit evaluation, and I believe that would have the speed limit drop to 25. That's probably, 6 months out, at least, for implementation? Is that right?
Clean more than that, but we'll get into that later.
Okay. Okay. I actually would encourage staff to also ask police to drive that street now and again. How about that? It's pretty busy and lots of trucks. It's kind of a scary street. Okay. A2, safety improvements on shared use path between Nancy Lane and West 64th Street. And staff recommends updating the signage to indicate the shared use nature of the path and also installing centerline striping to assist in separating two-way pedestrian and bicycle traffic. Questions? Welcome, Peter. Okay, then A3, request for a crosswalk on Park Lawn Avenue at new Lake Edina Playground. And questions, comments? Staff does recommend installing the marked crosswalk. Questions, comments? Okay. Everybody's so quiet tonight. Must be that you know that we're being streamed. All right, B1, request for a no outlet sign for Interlaken Bluff. Thoughts, comments? My comment is, it says you only recommend no outlet signs when the end of the street cannot be seen from the entrance. And it says the end of the cul-de-sac is visible, though slightly obscured due to the landscaped island. I guess my question is, what would be the hardship in installing the no outlet sign?
Generally speaking, it's another sign that the city has to maintain going forward. It seems like am I the only one that thinks this? It's a pretty long street to have no outlet and with no sign. I think you have to know what you're looking at to realize that there's no outlet. Anybody else have that same impression?
That's my impression from looking at the picture here, but I don't know the street. But I was thinking the same thing.
I agree.
If there was any temporary way to test this idea without a permanent sign installation.
I was going to add that I think it would be hard to know this is no outlet street either from the picture. I don't know that area in particular. It seems the cost is relatively low if there was an easy place to put it. Andrew, can you give us some more? This does seem like an easy change, but I know that staff is recommending against it.
So I'm going to see if I can provide a little bit more context here. So here's Interlaken, and this is Interlaken Bluff to the south. So I believe the concern that was expressed by the resident is that there's an undesirable amount of vehicles that turn into Interlaken Bluff either to turn around or because they are unaware that it's a no outlet. And so the intent of the sign is to reduce that turnaround traffic.
Yep. So even looking at the aerial view of it, because the street isn't straight and it's fairly long, I think recognizing that there is no outlet, I mean, there's a circle there, but there's no way to tell that that's really what it is. And I do think that people try and cut through those neighborhoods a lot. So I'd encourage the Traffic Safety Committee to maybe give that another look.
I agree. Andrew, is there something about the sign that makes it more expensive, or give us an estimate of the cost or the difficulties with putting a sign in there?
I don't have that offhand, unfortunately, but I could certainly look, review that and come back to the commission.
And
yes.
Is this a safety issue? What is a safety issue?
Sounds like it's increased traffic.
I would agree. Well, I guess I haven't spoken to this resident specifically who requested it, but my understanding is that the concern has more to do with the potential increased volume of traffic on the street due to the confusion of whether or not it is a no outlet.
So whether that is related to safety concerns or just traffic volume concerns, I can't say. But it's sounding like I'm hearing the commission recommending installing the no outlet sign.
I guess I would ask, how many other locations in Edina have the same rough distance of, I mean, there's got to be many more streets that look like this that don't have a sign. I don't really have a horse in the race, but it just seems, is it really that bad at traffic? I mean, if it's going to be an expense to the city and a hassle to the city, I'm not seeing the demand for it. And I got to think, I mean, it's not like it's France Avenue traffic. I mean, what, they don't want anybody down their street? Is it really that? That's what my opinion of it is.
That's what they want.
So in the report here, you can see we measured traffic volume on Interlaken Bluff at 94 vehicles per day. And there's 8 properties that are adjacent to the street. So it was our committee's determination that that amount of traffic was consistent with a roadway, consistent with the context of the roadway section. That was within the expected number of trips for a street that has 8 properties along it.
So that means there's that many trips per day down that street. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
So half of those are people coming and going, right? I mean, they got to go to work and come home. I mean, that's half of those for that. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's not that important. I mean,
to me, it seems like it just leads, it doesn't really, people driving in there must be turning around because there's really nowhere it could lead to, like just around that area. I don't know why people would be going in there looking to get through there.
Because you don't know that you can't go through there because there's not a good way to get through there.
Right, but so there's just nothing, there's nothing behind it that people would want to go to. So I'm not quite sure why people would be going in there besides to turn around, or if it's their house.
You'd probably only do it once, presumably.
Yeah, right. Hey, Andrew, is there a more general policy on cul-de-sacs that we could fall back on? I live on a cul-de-sac, but we don't have that sign. I think whoever said you make that mistake once and then you don't do it again. But is there any more general policy that we can apply here?
The general guidance that we use for the no outlet signs is we try to only put them in areas where you can't tell that it's a dead end from the beginning of the intersection. So that's kind of what's up for debate in this case, is whether or not from the vantage point of this picture, before you turn into that cul-de-sac, can you see the end of the cul-de-sac from there and know not to turn into it? Versus there's other areas where, trying to find another example. So Skyline here, just to the east, would be a good example. It's a no outlet, but you can't tell that it's a no outlet when you turn in from Interlaken.
Does it have a sign?
Does it have a sign? That's a good question. And I can answer that. It does have a sign.
So
everybody wants a sign.
Well, the request said that this has been a request multiple times. It strikes me as an easy solution that really isn't going to cost this. I mean, I recognize that there may be a maintenance cost to the sign, but pretty low. I mean, how often do you replace signs?
Yeah, I would agree with that, because if I mean, there's already a stop sign right there. So it's not like you're going to even have to install like a whole new pole or anything. You can literally just put it on the back of the stop sign or something. And
it's hard to know just from this picture, but it seems like it meets the criteria for getting one. You can't tell. But has anyone driven this to see whether you really can't tell when you're driving in that intersection?
This will be a poor approximation, but a little bit better than the picture.
Yeah, you know, as you're coming along Interlaken, as you go to make the turn, you can't see the end of the street.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it meets the policy.
Because it's been requested multiple times, and because I think that recognizing that it is in fact a cul-de-sac is even admittedly slightly obscured, I'd just err on the side of the residents who have been requesting this. I guess I'd ask the traffic safety committee to take it to consider adding the sign.
I know that we've done this in other intersections. Could you test it? Put a sign up for a while, test it. If it gets what the residents want and the
You measure the outcome.
numbers go down, then it's a success.
Possible, I suppose.
It seems like, you know, even, Andrew, it seems like it does meet the policy, though. That's what I keep going back to. You know, if our policy and procedures say we put one up when there's a cul-de-sac and you can't see the end of it from the intersection.
It meets that.
It seems like this meets it, doesn't it?
It was the opinion of the committee that it didn't. It was the overall opinion of the committee that you could see the end of it. So again, that's kind of one of the questions here.
I noted that the street just to the west of that is a U shape. So it would be hard to tell when you look down this street, is it also a turn like the block right before it versus a cul-de-sac, right? Because I bet if you look down that other street, which I can't see the name of.
Interlaken Circle.
Yeah. If you would be able to tell the difference between that one that it's a turn at the end versus this one that it's a cul-de-sac that has a little island in the middle.
Generally speaking, I don't know how common knowledge this is, but generally a street that has circle in the title is in its name
indication that it's a circle. Yes.
Indicates that that it's not a no outlet. But I don't know if, you know, if the average person would know the difference between looking at Interlaken Circle versus Interlaken Bluff.
Just these transportation geeks.
Just us.
So people who don't know the area, who are maybe trying to get to Highland Park or, you know, they turn down Highland Circle and it takes them right back out to Interlaken Boulevard. So they make the next right on Interlaken Bluff, and that's a cul-de-sac. But they can't, as they make a right onto Interlaken, you know, as they're turning, they really can't see the end. So they don't know. Again, I think this is sort of a low risk, high satisfaction proposition to give them the sign.
There's a sort of borderline on the policy side, whether it quite meets criteria. It seems to me in the pictures sort of borderline. So why not give it to the residents?
Exactly.
Or why don't we just change the name to Circle? Add Circle to the end of the street.
That is a very complicated process.
Yeah, really. This would probably be a lot easier. All right, can we move on?
Just so that I'm clear, it's sounding, my understanding is that the commission is recommending to install the no outlet.
Yeah. Well, I am.
Yep.
I support.
Yes.
Do you need a motion for that?
Do you want to do a motion and a formal vote on that?
Sure. I will take a motion and a second to give the no outlet sign to Interlaken Bluff.
I move we post a no outlet sign for Interlaken Bluff.
Is there a second? Was that you, Mindy?
A second, yes, Mindy.
Okay, all in favor of the no outlet sign for Interlaken Bluff? Please answer aye to Andrew's roll call.
Commissioner Aller?
Can't hear you, but I think you called my name as an aye.
Thank you. Sorry, Mindy.
That's all right.
Commissioner Kane?
Aye.
Commissioner Lafferty?
Nay.
Commissioner McCarthy?
Aye.
Chair Richmond. Commissioner Ruthruff.
Aye.
Commissioner Shearer. Commissioner Erickson.
Aye.
Commissioner Vanell.
Aye.
Passes.
Okay. Moving on then to B2. All these B ones are so interesting this time. Request for stop signs at Zenith Avenue and West 59th Street. Interesting that in the bullet points, it's noted that a 6-year-old traveling south on the bicycle was hit by a westbound driver. And then 4 bullet points down, it says no crashes have been reported in the last 10 years.
So the latter bullet point refers to the intersection in question.
Okay. I see.
So
Oh, the first one is the alley. Oh.
Right.
So the accident occurred here where my cursor is, and the stop is being requested at the intersection to the west. That's why those 2 bullet points seem to be counter to each other.
I see. So several residents are requesting this. Has this been requested before?
Not to my knowledge. Usually if it's been requested report, that's included in the report.
Okay. Thoughts?
Well, just a question first for Andrew. What is the criteria for installing a stop sign? This one doesn't quite.
There's
Is
a
it just
number of.
me that's having a hard time hearing Bruce?
His audio is bad.
Okay.
It's a little quiet.
Yes.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, my Bluetooth is kind of, little thing is going on the blink. But Andrew, so I'll repeat my question. So Andrew, what's the criteria for stop signs? And I'm presuming that this this intersection doesn't warrant one by the regular criteria.
There's 3 primary criteria for installing a stop sign. One has to do with traffic volumes. I can't recall offhand what those are. What I recall is something like an average of 300 vehicles an hour over an 8-hour period. So these streets get at most 200 cars a day. So they don't experience enough traffic to warrant a stop sign. Crash history is another thing. There's no crashes here at the intersection, so it doesn't meet that category. And then the third is sightline obstructions, which in our opinion were not, that condition was not warranted here.
Any other thoughts?
I agree with the recommendation.
I agree with the recommendation too. Otherwise, everyone would be requesting stop signs.
This is my neighborhood. This one and the next one. It's a difficult area because there are quite a few intersections that are not controlled or controlled partially. And sometimes the cars zip down the streets pretty fast and through the intersections pretty fast. That said, this one, having a stop sign there would probably not have changed the 6-year-old on the alley situation. I do think that this area bears watching though for additional traffic control, because it can be, you just have to be super careful walking in this area and biking in this area. Everybody's agreeing with the recommendation? Okay. And B3 now is, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is also the one that we received the communication today?
Correct. And we've also, the city council is formally receiving a petition Tuesday night from the residents here for the always stop.
I'm going to start this one because when I looked at this and I got the communication, I had to laugh. My son and I walked this area. We walked this area last night, and he said to me, "I wonder if someone bribed someone to get that stop facing the way that it is." They're bad stops. I mean, there should be four-way stops, and I get that the warrants may not call for that. These are two terrible intersections, and visibility is terrible.
I think I agree with you, Lori. I would suggest putting four-way stops right there. We have almost everybody from that community that wants that. And when you also look at the MUT CD, right, the MUTCD, the city or the engineer have the discretion of adding that, okay, because the conditions have changed.
It's interesting to me that it says that sightline concerns are present. Sightline concerns are significant, in my opinion. There are hills that come down to Beard from the west. Actually, it's not as much of a hill on the east side, but still a hill at both 56th and 57th. And I realize this one is specific to 57th, but I think their communication was about both intersections.
In my experience, I lived initially in Edina over on Shannon Drive and Cahill, Shannon and Dewey Hill. And there was a stop sign at our corner there. And despite a stop sign, people blew through that stop sign all the time. I mean, I don't mind putting more stop signs. I guess I'm fine with it, but I don't know that it's necessarily going to change people's behavior that much. I mean, so for whatever it's worth, I mean, I think adding them is no big deal because I don't think people, I saw people drive through that intersection all the time. So.
With all due respect, these roads are bicycled a lot by neighborhood kids and adults alike. They're walked a lot. The creek is just north of 56th and Beard. It's a major walking area, and I think it bears whether. I mean, I guess my concern is we wouldn't not put something in because people might blow through the stop sign. I think we want safe streets, and we want them walkable and bikeable as well. So
people will get used to it too, and then they'll start stopping. They'll blow through it, but over time they have to stop, otherwise they get tired.
Well, to Lori's point, that is actually a concern of staff's, and that's the reason why we follow these warrants for stop signs, is because we want to try and avoid putting in traffic control devices that aren't warranted, because those tend not to be obeyed, and they could potentially create a false sense of security both to motorists and to pedestrians and cyclists. So that's also a consideration that we have with this case.
I would suggest then we do the same thing we did with the Interlaken one. So probably demo something there and see how people respond to that.
other thoughts? Welcome, Matt.
Question, since it seemed that some of the site concerns that were noted in the residents' communication had to do with vegetation, what are the rules about having the vegetation trimmed back to reduce those site concerns? Is the vegetation that's there potentially in violation of whatever codes we have about how close to an intersection it can be and how tall it can be? There was a picture in the communication from the resident that might be more current. This is obvious. This looks like it's
Right.
fall and the color of the tree.
Right.
There's a lot of vegetation.
I think this is the one that was in the communique, coming up to the stop sign and the tree to the right.
But when there's already a stop sign there, that one is where people should stop and then look. I mean, how is that? There's already one there.
The difficulty with that, and I get that that bicyclists should obey all the stop signs as well, but because you've got hills both directions where the stop signs are, people on bikes cruise through the stop signs, and then the other direction there is no stop sign, and that's part of the problem. And they can't see, so the kids come down on bikes, they can't see into the intersection because of the vegetation. They don't want to work so hard to go up the opposite side hill. And so they cruise through the intersection, and the other direction, there's no stop sign. This is one of those where it's like the warrant and the anecdotal evidence really don't agree with each other. In my opinion.
I have concerns about adding another stop sign if people are not stopping appropriately and looking around the corner, and therefore are, then endangering someone because they're already not following the rules. Adding an additional stop sign won't make people follow the rules. And I wonder if it will add to the danger for bicycles that are coming on Beard for that very reason, that they're not used to a stop sign and therefore they'd ignore it.
Andrew, what's the? Oh, sorry. It does the when I at that street what I was just referencing earlier. I had asked the city or someone I talked to that back. This is 10 years ago. Asked them if they could put one of those lighted stop signs up. How effective are those? Do those really make a difference? Are those shown to help bikers and other people respect that stop sign more?
I'm not familiar with any specific studies on those. Anecdotally, my understanding is that they're quite effective at night or under dark conditions. I don't know necessarily what impact they have during the day, but that's certainly something I can look into and get back to you on.
It's an interesting question. So if there is a stop sign on one way, and the rationale for a four-way is because people aren't stopping for that, that's a tough one kind of for me to support. If it's because of the sight lines, I guess that would meet our criteria. So that's a tough one for me. Hey, let me ask you this. What about the, putting a sign below the stop sign where it says cross street does not stop or something like that? Are those effective?
I don't know. Typically, those are applied in a more unique condition. So, for example, if this was the only leg of the intersection that had a stop, then you would typically see it accompanied with a sign that says, all other traffic doesn't, yield to all other traffic, or cross traffic does not stop. But because this is a two-way street, it's just kind of implied. Similarly, if this were a three-way stop versus a one-way, then you would see the plaques that say traffic from the left doesn't stop, or traffic to the right doesn't stop.
Andrew.
Yes.
Does putting four-way stops violate the MUT CD?
Because there's it's a difficult question, because there is language in there that gives the engineer some discretion in installing these. So
correct. And those areas have changed, right? You have a lot of kids. Maybe the principal artery, when they put the signs, have changed. You reverse. Maybe more traffic comes from the other side, right? Because there's a reason why they put a sign, stop sign, on one side, right?
I assume there was a reason. Unfortunately, we don't have the documentation for why exactly it was put up in that configuration.
Okay. So it doesn't violate the MUD. I think it's a normal request from the citizens. I really would say we add 4 signs, 4 stop sign there. A lot of safety concerns for the kids, for the bikers, for everybody. And anybody that blows through a stop sign will be ticketed. This is just these are the rules.
So again, this is my neighborhood. I walk those intersections daily. I think the letter specifically calls out the high volume of pedestrians and bicyclists and the high volume of traffic. And I think for those reasons, I would support the 4-way stop signs. It is a safety concern. We've experienced it.
Does the commission formal motion?
I would like to pass a
question.
motion. Yep.
Sorry, Mindy, you first.
Based on something you said before, Lori, about that there's a number of uncontrolled intersections in this area. Is there policy in the city to like take a general look at an area? Because I think of like Minneapolis doesn't have uncontrolled intersections anymore. Essentially, there is always a stop sign one direction or another. And this isn't that far from Minneapolis where people are used to seeing stop signs. All of a sudden they're in a neighborhood that there are uncontrolled intersections that they may not be expecting. And is there a way to just have a general review of the area and look at it as a whole instead of just putting in a 4-way stop here and then it'll be the next place that someone requests a stop sign, or as we've already seen in the other one, instead of doing it piecemeal, to look at it as a whole system?
So to answer your question about whether there's a policy specific to that, no. What I will say is that council has in the past directed staff to do those kind of traffic studies. And in fact, this area, they had directed staff to do a study back in 2010 when there was an all-way stop requested at the intersection of Chowan and 58th. And in that 2010 staff review, staff both denied the request for an all-way stop and determined that the existing traffic control in the neighborhood was sufficient. But again, that was in 2010.
So now we have, gosh, I don't know what, 25 out of the 36 residents who don't agree that the traffic control is sufficient. And as I've experienced it myself, I'd be interested in if anybody else would like to make a motion. Can I make a motion as chair? I mean, we can put it to a
I
vote.
think you can. I will make a motion. I agree with the pedestrian, with the letter that we received, and I would motion that we put a 4-way stop there. We recommend putting a 4-way stop there.
Okay, is there a second?
I second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Andrew, would you be so kind as to take a roll call vote?
Gladly.
Thank you.
Commissioner Aller?
Hey.
Commissioner Kane?
Hey.
Commissioner Lafferty?
Hey.
Commissioner McCarthy?
Aye.
Chair Richmond?
Aye.
Commissioner Ruthruff?
Aye.
Commissioner Shearer?
Aye.
Commissioner Erickson?
Aye.
Commissioner Vanell?
Aye.
And approved unanimously.
My vote was nay.
Oh, sorry. Still approved, not unanimous.
Simply because of my concern that we're putting a piecemeal, that we're adding a stop sign in a piecemeal method instead of looking at a larger system. That's my biggest concern here. That it's actually a bigger problem that we may not fix with one stop sign.
Okay. Moving
So
on then.
can I ask one question? When something like this happens, does that mean it's done? It's going to happen, or now it has? What's the next step? Just out of curiosity, what happens beyond this?
Good question. So the two motions that the commission has made are recommendations. So what happens now is this staff report will get updated before it goes to city council. It will, staff will review the motions and comments that the ETC has made and consider either changing or maintaining their recommendation, but there will be an added bullet on those respective items that say the Transportation Commission recommended this, recommended for the no outlet sign and recommended for the always stop. So council will have those two recommendations to consider before they approve the whole report.
I just add one note. I'm glad this is going forward, but I think Mindy's right about taking a bigger look at this and maybe adjusting our criteria where we put in stop signs, where we don't, so we don't do it sort of case by case. Support that idea.
But guys,
Thank you.
just a quick thing here. I think it's going to have to be a piece until maybe Andrew and the CDCs is a predominant issue. Then we can take a bigger look at it. So this is normal, I think.
I agree with Mindy's general point, and maybe that becomes a work item to recommend that the city has a overall approach to that rather than intersection by intersection.
I guess the only other thing I had to add, I missed part of this, so I'm sorry if anyone said it, but a lot of these, it seems like a lot of this is popping up while 58th is cut up, and I just wonder if this all changes when 58th is open again.
That's a good point, but I guess oh, sorry, Lori.
I was going to say, this is not new. This has been going on for many years.
This is the third official request that the city's received in, I can't remember if it's 10 years or 6 years. I know it's a third request. I can't remember over what time period.
Sure. I mean, I get that. I'm just saying, like, look at this one in the 59th and Zenith. It seems like those are the streets that are directly adjacent to 58th, which is closed.
Okay, moving on. We're on B4, which is the request for resident-only parking along Cornelius Circle. Questions, comments?
I will note that the curb cut that they talked about still hasn't been installed a couple of years after we passed that one, Andrew. So if you wouldn't mind checking in with the department, see when they're going to put that one in.
Actually, so we were about to put it in, and then the adjacent residents raised this issue, this concern to us, that they believe that the curb cut is going to increase the amount of times that Roslyn Park visitors are parking in the cul-de-sac. So it was a staff decision to not have the ramp installed. And that's noted in the final bullet of the report here.
Okay,
I
moving on.
guess I will note that that picture looks like it's on the 4th of July when they had a fireworks display. There's only like one day a year when it gets that crazy over there, just to point it out.
Yeah, this is near my house, and it doesn't normally get that crazy, but there definitely are a number during the summer, at least, and maybe not as many this summer because of COVID and everything, but especially when the pool is open, there are a number of cars that will line that little circle right there. And I mean, I know that this is just like a one-day thing, but if they couldn't even get out of their houses or get out of their driveways, that seems a little absurd.
Andrew, can you do an overview of that one or whatever, just so I can see the please?
Certainly.
Strikes me that a solution would be helpful for that area. I'm just not sure that's the right solution.
I think it's really a tough call. I'm pretty familiar with this area. Yeah, so there's the cul-de-sac, or that little, I'm not sure what even, I guess it's a cul-de-sac. And it's really a tough one because You know, sort of like when you live near a school or any other, you know, entity that people want to park and go to. You know, if you live there, people are going to be parking on your street, and that's a tough one. It's a really tough thing to restrict in a way. But I do feel for the residents. I don't know how to keep their access open, unencumbered, and still allow
Is that the thing?
regular parking.
Is that the one that's the south of 66 there, that one?
Yeah.
Correct.
And people are parking in there? That seems a little, can't you just, wow, that's bizarre.
It's not crazy. If you see that around that lake there, it's a 1 mile loop. And so if you want to just go out and run or walk a 1 mile loop, you might not want to park all the way over in the parking lot, which is funny because if you're trying to get exercise, I guess you would.
It can also happen when the parking lots overflow during like pool season.
Right.
Remembering conversations we had around requests for restrictions around the high school of, well, streets are public entities. When does it make sense to restrict parking when they are public entities?
And I will make one other comment about it. Like the reason why whoever requested it in the first place was because they wanted to be able to cross with a stroller. And I don't see why installing a pedestrian ramp would all of a sudden lead to a whole bunch of people parking there. I think that's sort of preposterous. So I just don't know that I agree with the logic of what they're saying.
Okay, any recommendations there, or should we move on to B5? Let's move on. So this is traffic calming on Creek Valley Road. Out of curiosity, is this going on now, Andrew? Or is this during actual athletic production time?
The request was received, so if it's included in this report, it was received sometime before mid-June.
Okay.
Not sure when specifically it was requested. I will say we've received, I'll say, a number of complaints of this general nature from this cul-de-sac in recent years.
And when is the engineering redesign of the intersection occurring? Am I missing that?
So that is, we're bringing it to council on Tuesday for award, but at the same time, council is also receiving a petition from these residents to not go forward with the project.
Huh.
So council will have to decide whether or not to proceed with the intersection realignment or not.
So is there any way to request that we see this again after we find out the results of that, of whether it will be reconstructed or not? Because part of me thinks I'd like to wait until after it's been reconstructed and see if that has an impact. But if the decision will be to not reconstruct it, that would then, of course, change my view on this item.
That sounds reasonable to me.
Is this also a no outlet street?
It is. It is, and I believe it has a sign. I would assume it has a sign. I would assume so, because you definitely cannot see the end of it.
I know it's a common bike route for getting to the high school, because it has a pedestrian entrance at the end of the street.
There's the sign.
Yeah.
So that seems fair to me to bring this back in a month after council has decided on whether or not to proceed with the intersection realignment.
Okay.
Because if they do, then it should be looked at after they've done the realignment, probably 6 months afterwards, and see if it's still an issue.
We good with that one then?
Thank you.
Okay, I see a lot of nodding, so okay, we'll move on to B6, request to improve the crosswalk on Wooddale at 60th.
I travel this road all the time, and it's a common street. It's similar to this, I would say, to Dewey Hill, where, but I do see people, frequently I come up to Wooddale to get out of my neighborhood on 56, and I see a lot of courtesy happening, but obviously not by everybody. And so I don't know, again, how much a change is going to improve things. That's just, unfortunately, people aren't, short of narrowing the road, which, to really draw people to slow down. I don't know if that's going to really affect it. It's a busy street with bike lanes.
So Andrew, I want to be clear about that. The request was to improve the crosswalk. Since that request was made, then staff double-sided the road signs, or before that?
I believe it was before this request. I believe we had a prior request or a couple prior requests shortly after this was installed, because this crosswalk was just installed last year. And after those requests, the sign was, they were double signed. You can see in the picture there shows the original installation where there are only one-sided signs.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So this request is in addition to the double-sided signs.
Okay.
This seems to be an example of a request for a crosswalk to make crossing safer, and an example that just because you put it in there doesn't mean it's going to work. I don't know how you legislate bad behavior or
the three crashes. It says 3 crashes have occurred, including the bicyclist hit, since 2015. Have any of those been since the crosswalk was installed in 2019?
Not to my knowledge. I would have to look into that.
Okay. Yeah, would you? Because, if there have not been crashes since the redesign, the new crosswalk, I'd be inclined to let this one be. But if 2 of the 3 were in 2019 after the new crosswalk, we might want to take another look at it. Any other comments?
No, that's reasonable.
Has there been a recommendation of the police department to monitor this, since the concern is that people aren't stopped for pedestrians that are in a crosswalk?
That was not included in the committee's recommendation, but it's certainly something that the commission could recommend.
Andrew.
Yes.
Do they have flashing light?
These do not.
Okay. Do we need to look into that? If they do have flashing light and they're still not stopping, it became just an enforcement issue. Then the police has to deal with that.
So the treatment out there right now follows our existing crossing policy based on the number of pedestrians that are crossing. It's actually slightly above what our policy recommends because the signs are two-sided. But an RFB would require significantly more pedestrian crosses.
Okay. So then we are left then with police enforcement, then, right?
Correct.
Interestingly, the resident is concerned that vehicles aren't stopping for pedestrians, but does not necessarily, I don't see anything that indicates that they believe that this is really a dangerous intersection for pedestrians. And that might be because it's not a huge high traffic volume and there's not a lot of pedestrians. I'm not sure. That's all speculation. That's why I say if none of the crashes have happened since the redesign, I'm inclined to let this one go with the addition of the double-sided road signs. Anybody want to make a motion about something?
Well, I was just going to say, I think you're right. I think that's a key piece of information. If what has been done seems to have fixed the problem, then I think that we're done. But I'm not sure the residents feel that way. It's a little unclear. Because why would they be coming to us now?
Okay. Hearing no motion, the rest of these are D items. So I will take a motion to approve the traffic safety report with the addition of our 2 recommendations.
So moved.
It's been moved
Second.
and seconded. Andrew, it's all yours.
Commissioner Aller,
Aye.
Commissioner Kane,
Aye.
Commissioner Lafferty,
Aye. Aye.
Commissioner Lafferty. Peter, did we lose you?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Chair Richmond,
Aye.
Commissioner Ruthruff,
Aye.
Commissioner Scheer,
Aye.
Commissioner Erickson,
Aye.
Commissioner Vanel.
Aye.
Approved.
All right then. Well, that was just our first agenda item.
That's an hour.
So moving on to the draft local speed limit evaluation and recommendations. This is your show, Andrew. This is awesome.
Yes, it is. Let me queue up my presentation here.
Okay.
So I'll keep it relatively brief, but I'll just kind of start with a summary of what we're recommending, the background, kind of why we're looking at speed limits right now, some of the national research and guidance that was used to develop this recommendation, options for approaches, the basis for the recommendation, some of our internal review, and then talk about kind of what the questions are still left and what our next steps are. So something to keep in mind as I go through this brief presentation, what we're looking for input on from the commission and from council at this point is, does the recommendation seem appropriate and adequately justified? How does the pandemic and our current political climate impact the implementation schedule? And I'll get into that more a little later. And then should staff, this is more from council, we're going to be asking them, should staff continue to develop an implementation plan, which includes looking at signage costs, enforcement, education strategies, and outreach to our neighboring agencies.
Okay.
Come on, next slide. Too fast. Here we go. So this is an overview of what we are recommending at this point. So we're recommending a tiered approach to setting our local speed limits. So starting on the high end, generally speaking, our 4-lane major streets would be signed for 30 miles an hour. Our 2-lane major streets, the majority of these are our municipal state aid routes or our highway frontage roads, would be 25 miles per hour. The exception would be the areas in green, which are within school zones. Those would be signed at 20 miles an hour when children are present. In blue, the majority of our streets would be the 20 mile an hour minor residential streets, with the exception in purple, those that are within school zones would be 15 miles per hour when children are present. 10 miles an hour would be the recommendation in alleys, which is what the current restriction is. And then there'd be no changes to our private streets, county roads, or state highways. So some of you may know, effective last August, Minnesota cities have the authority to set speed limits on roads that they control. The city's been supportive of changing that statutory language since at least 2006. The Transportation Commission has been particularly vocal in this issue. And in March of this year, St. Paul and Minneapolis both announced that they had plans to change their local speed limits in accordance with this legislation. And Minneapolis is currently in the process of implementing those changes and are expected to be completed in the fall of this year. So there's a number of national agencies that I reviewed literature to guide the decisions of this recommendation. Speed limits are traditionally set based on the 85th percentile speed. Is an industry term that means the speed at which 85% of free-flowing traffic is observed to travel at or under. So speed limits are inherently set assuming that 15% of free-flowing traffic is going to go faster. The multiple agencies have conducted research to support the fact that speed increases the likelihood and the severity of motor vehicle crashes. And there's a growing movement in the industry, in the transportation industry, to take into consideration our vulnerable road users, so our pedestrians and our cyclists, as factors when setting speed limits, rather than going based on the 85th percentile speed, which primarily puts a focus on motor vehicles. The National Association for City Transportation Officials has developed this guidance for agencies that wish to set their own speed limits. These are the two approaches. There's a uniform approach in which one speed limit is set and applied to all local streets. This is a rather inexpensive and quick way to implement lower local speed limits because the signage is all the same. Similarly, because these limits are all the same, it sets more consistent expectations for drivers. On the other hand, this approach usually, cities that follow this approach usually set a higher speed limit, so 25 miles an hour versus 20, because they still need to facilitate traffic flow on their collector streets. The second approach is a tiered approach, which is what the city of Minneapolis has gone with, and that's where speed limit varies based on classification. It requires more signage because you have different limits, and it requires more education among your constituents to establish what those expectations are. But this approach also considers the increased modal separation of the roadways as traffic volume increases. So if you think of the majority of our streets that are local residential, the majority of them do not have sidewalks, do not have separated bicycle facilities, all the users occupying the same space. So in this approach, those streets are set to the lowest speed limit, are set to 20 miles an hour for the protection of all those users, versus a highway frontage road, for example, where you are more likely to have a sidewalk, to have pedestrians off the street. You're more likely to have a separated bike lane or a trail where the user, so the corridor is inherently more safer for all users because they're more separated. Next slide. Eventually, too far. Apologies, my computer is lagging a little bit. Okay, so I guess to summarize, it's our opinion that the lower speed limits support the goals in the comprehensive plan and the Living Streets plan, specifically safety. As I said, lower speeds reduce the likelihood and the severity of motor vehicle crashes, and equity in that they prioritize the vulnerable users over motorists. And the tiered approach we feel is most appropriate for Edina, which is consistent with what Minneapolis is currently implementing. In reviewing this recommendation with our Public Works Department, some of the questions or concerns that they brought up, how much signage is required compared to what we have right now. They noted that with this approach, with either approach, there's a need to identify gateway locations in the city where you post a sign that says all city speeds are 20 miles an hour unless noted otherwise. They are interested in the associated material and labor costs for both changing our existing signage and installing any new signage that is necessary. And then they raise the question about what the expected implementation schedule is, whether or not this is supposed to be, whether or not this is planned to be implemented over a period of months or years or somewhere in between. The police department has also reviewed this recommendation. Their concerns include enforcement in general, but particularly on the higher volume roads that we have that we already know have high speeds. Interlaken Boulevard is an example. Another concern they have is the perception that traffic stops are just a revenue generator for the PD. So they're concerned that making this change could increase the number of stops they do and make that perception even worse. A kind of an ongoing concern that the police department has is exposure to COVID for their officers. So my understanding is that they've, to some degree, reduced the amount of traffic stops that they're doing in order to limit that exposure and protect their officers. Locally and nationally, there's a whole spectrum of attitudes towards law enforcement. So we want to be respectful of that as we develop these recommendations and consider how they may impact police's workload and their perception to the public. And then community education will be a very important component of implementing this.
Can I make one comment on that slide, or do you want to wait till the end?
I'm just about on the last slide.
Okay.
So again, the questions, does this recommendation seem appropriate? How does the pandemic and the current political climate change our implementation schedule, and should we continue with this recommendation?
Was that you, Peter?
Well, I just, given all the, I don't know what you call it, George Floyd and everything that's sort of happened since then, it occurred to me that, can you go back to that slide, Andrew, please?
Yep, sorry.
The police slide specifically. So the ones, the second, third, fourth, and fifth item, to me, there is and actually all of them could be solved. And so I'm just going to make I lived in Germany for 3 years, or 2 years rather. And in Germany, you never see the police pulling people over. They have guys in lab coats that set up speed traps or speed things every morning. And the police are at the police station. They don't have these problems that we have. I don't want to spend all night on this, but my point is that this part, what they're suggesting, could be handled. They don't have to pull people over. I'm not trying to make some big political statement, but they don't have to pull people over. We have enough technology, and certainly the funds in Edina, in Arizona, where I lived for 3 years, Paradise Valley has been doing speed control by ticketing for at least, I lived there 25 years ago, by using, they're not pulling the people over. They're using these speed traps and taking photographs of cars. For whatever reason, I'll just say culturally, we use the strategy of trying to sort of catch people, and that doesn't relate to any of this part that you just mentioned. In my opinion, none of those things they need to use to enforce the speed. None of those things apply. I don't necessarily agree with reducing the speed, but I don't think their point is based on them continuing to do traffic stops, and they don't even need to do that unless someone is, weaving all over the road. They could set up. So anyway, that's it. I can keep going on. That's my point. So
I have to say that was an awesome comment, Peter. And that is something that, if you've taken a look at the comprehensive plan, we're suggesting that technology be used much more fully to assist in the congestion and all of it. So this would be consistent. That would be consistent with that recommendation. That technology. I love the speed limit decrease. I love the recommendation.
Here's the thing. To me, why doesn't Edina decide to be a leader and say, you know what, we got the budget clearly to spend money on everything. Why don't we come up with a system that's probably out there where these police could record a license plate for someone that has a broken license or a broken tail light, or they're missing a tab, and send them. Why do they have to create this tension-filled situation that bleeds over into all this other stuff? anyway, again, I don't want to get crazy on it, but we
I
should certainly do
I
that.
want to stop you before we go down that rabbit hole. Let's stick with this exact topics because I think Andrew would like our feedback. Other thoughts?
I strongly support decreasing the speed limit in neighborhoods. I do worry about having the 25-20 distinction. I think that might get a little complicated. I also worry about people that are visiting our city because I think 20, I'm not sure about this, but I think 20 miles an hour in residential areas is a little bit uncommon in the state. So there might be people that get caught up in this sort of unintentionally.
Can you compare what you're recommending to what Plus is implementing?
Sure. It is the general category of the tiering is almost identical to what they're recommending. They're recommending 20 miles an hour on their local streets. And then from there, some of their more busier streets are 25. I can't say specifically whether they're all MSA roads, but they have the majority of the cities. It is. The exception, they have some of their streets, they have a 35 mile an hour category on theirs, and I believe they also have some that are 40. But Minneapolis, local streets in Minneapolis can carry significantly more traffic than our local streets.
I'm reluctant to just do this because, or have a contributing factor of this because Minneapolis is doing it. They have, it seems to me, a lot of other things they're doing with traffic, road diets, and very aggressive control of people and transportation. And I would not want to model this after what the city of Minneapolis is doing, because their agenda is they have an agenda that is around promoting other types of transportation, which I know we want to do some of that, but to do it under to lower speeds just because I need more information before I could say that, okay, I don't know that's going to change things that much. And so.
Okay, other folks, thoughts?
I agree with Bruce that about lowering the speeds because it is consistent with the pedestrian bike plan.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for ways to educate the community, paint the curbs, paint them blue for 25 and green for 20 or something like that. So it's visual all the way as you're going down the road, and you learn over time what the speed is in that neighborhood based on what color the curb is or something like that. I mean, it's expensive, but will become obvious to people over time. But if nothing else, for the perception that we are doing something to make it safer for bikes and pedestrians, I'm in favor of this.
Thanks, Eric.
Yep.
Hey, Andrew, I had one quick question.
Sure.
The school zone stuff, I'm assuming that's like when kids are present or something, because otherwise it's going to be really confusing where you're going to slow down, speed up, slow down in a lot of different areas. I just want to make sure that's the case.
That is correct. And the school zones are what's being proposed for the school zones. You can see here the comparison of the two. I apologize for all the colors. But generally the school zones are staying as restricted as they are right now or going lower. So I kind of set up this general philosophy where school zones of major streets are 20 and school zones of minor streets are 15. But there's some existing that don't follow that procedure. An example would be around Concord and Southview. The Normandale Frontage Road, South and Concord Avenue there are all currently signed as 15 when children are present. Those are all municipal state aid roads. So under the guidance that I developed, I would recommend those to be 20 if they weren't already signed. But because they're already at 15, I'm not proposing to change that. An example to the contrary would be Creek Valley here by Creek Valley Elementary School is currently a 20-mile-an-hour speed school zone. Because it's a local street, I'm recommending reducing that down to 15.
Andrew, they said it makes it safer. How much safer? Like, what is the percentage if you go from 25 to 20 or whatever the variance here? I mean, how much safer is it? I mean,
so in my report, I have, so there's a couple things to consider. Generally, vehicle stopping distances for vehicles change dramatically. If you reduce from, say, for example, 30 miles an hour down to 20 miles an hour, your stopping distance is shortened by about 80 feet. And regarding likelihood of injury or death, these are kind of general numbers. There have been a number of different agencies that have conducted more specific studies, but generally going from 30 to 20 miles an hour, the likelihood of severe injury or death drops from 40% to 10%.
Good data. Mindy, you haven't voiced a thought on this?
Been waiting my turn.
Okay.
I'm generally very much in favor of reducing our speed limits. It's something we have talked about multiple times. I think it's also come up many times when we're looking at the traffic safety report of what if traffic were just slower. So I'm very much in favor of the proposal. And I do think that being consistent with Minneapolis makes enforcement easier because it's less confusing. I'm curious whether our other bordering cities have any proposals and whether they might be consistent with this, like St. Louis Park or Eden Prairie or Bloomington.
I guess I could speak to that. So when this legislation came about, most cities there was a general understanding that Minneapolis and St. Paul were kind of going to take the lead in implementing this. And so the majority, if not all, of kind of the neighboring cities in the state said, let's wait and see what Minneapolis comes up with, and not necessarily copy what they're doing, but let's learn from what their analysis says. So they came out with a recommendation in March. We reviewed it and applied it to our streets. And I've reached out to a few of our neighboring agencies. St. Louis Park is in the early steps of developing a plan to evaluate their speed limits. I believe the city of Minnetonka is doing the same. So I think what we're going to see is kind of a slow trickle out suburbs.
Okay. Who else haven't we heard from? Bokar?
Yeah, Andrew. Hey, a quick thing here. What are the lessons learned from Minneapolis that we could use and replicate?
They're just doing it.
Right? Minneapolis reduced their speed for a while now. So there's something that we've learned. What is that? What did they learn?
They're still in the process of implementing, so I haven't heard that they really have any data yet on how effective it's been, and I don't know that we will necessarily get that specific data until they've been up for at least a year citywide. Some of the things that we're looking at, though, are, for example, the communication strategies and tools that they've used to get the word out to the public. Those are things that we're looking at and considering. And generally, they're when we likely go forward with developing a signage plan, we're going to look to Minneapolis as an example to see what they did and what they felt worked for them, and what we think will work for us.
Okay, so we have long ways to go before we implement anything, right?
The pandemic, the combination of the pandemic and the attitudes toward law enforcement in the country, I'll say, are both kind of the question marks here. So I think originally when this legislation went into effect, there was kind of my expectation was we would potentially start implementing this year. I think the pandemic really changed the game, and probably more likely to implement starting next year. but I can't say that for certain because we haven't even reviewed this with City Council yet.
Okay.
We do that on Tuesday, and after that, we'll have a better sense of how they feel about this recommendation and how they want us to proceed and how quickly they want us to proceed.
Okay, it'd be nice to have some data for the city council to look at to see the improvements from where they left the baseline to the future state that they got to, and the gap they have closed by reducing the speed limit.
Andrew, when you review this with City Council, would you make a note to mention on the page that is about concerns about about enforcement that ETC has recommended that the city begin to implement technology for enforcement rather than police?
Yes, I am planning to have a whole nother slide. It has just the Transportation Commission comments.
Okay, great.
So I'm making notes and I will include that.
Great, thanks. Simon and Tayden, do you have thoughts about this?
None really from me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm on the same boat as that. I like what's been said though.
Thank you. Said everybody.
Okay.
Everybody's said their thing.
Can I add one?
Go ahead, Bruce.
Let me just add one more thought. I personally, in terms of implementation, it would be preferable in my mind if we did this in concert with the other local cities around us, Richfield, Bloomington, and whatnot. I'm a little worried about having, a very different speed limit than our surrounding communities. I like the idea of technological enforcement. I think you might run into some people that are going to be worried about, surveillance cameras and things like that. But personally, I support it. I do have a little bit of a worry about differential enforcement, whether this could become a gotcha for someone who doesn't live in our city, particularly if they're, if they're Black or, that they don't usually belong here. So I worry a little bit about that.
So I'll only make one quick note about the camera thing. I don't know if it has anything to do with the speed limit cameras, but I don't know if you guys recall, Supreme Court made it illegal for the city of Minneapolis to do the stoplight ones.
Yep.
We had started installing a lot of those, and I'm not sure that the speed limit cameras would be any different from the perspective with a law change anyway.
Matt, the reason that happened was because they decided to only have photographs of people from the cars from behind. There was that's my understanding. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure what happened was that in every other place they take a photo of the front of the car, and there was some privacy or somebody raised an objection, and so the city of Minneapolis decided to only do photos from back. So then basically it was challenged, and people said, well, gosh, how do you know that was me? And that was ultimately why. I was living down there at the time, and they wasted a whole bunch of money. If they would have had the photos taken from the front where it would have been impossible to dispute it, then, or near impossible, then that would have been passed. So that was a complete waste of city of Minneapolis dollars.
Okay, Andrew, do you have what you need from us?
I have one other comment in terms of implementation. Another piece I would like to see sooner in the process would be input from citizens, from residents of Edina. And maybe that's something that we can go forward with, even if the actual implementation would be later. I'd put that as a higher priority because we can see that by all of our planning, which has included resident input, that lowering speed limits is consistent with that. But I would be curious if people saw this plan now, how they feel about it.
And added on to that, I sort of agree with Bokar that if we plan to do this, let's put it out there, let's get feedback from citizens, and wait till we have some data from Minneapolis to see how successful it is before we implement it. So it's okay to have the plan, and we just don't have to do it or spend the money or make the change, educate people until we see some data that it works.
To be fair,
Good idea.
to that point about data, we may not necessarily have local data, but many other
national
cities
data.
across the country have done some similar things, and they've done studies to show its varying degrees of efficacy.
Okay.
I believe I have that included in the report.
Yeah.
If not, I should look into that.
Okay. I think we will move along to the traffic and parking study for the 4425 Valley View Road.
Boy, I should.
Andrew, when you, I didn't even notice what you sent out to folks on this. Did you send them the same thing you sent to me so that folks could actually listen to the plan and discuss this?
I don't recall if I sent the meeting link out or not.
Okay. Okay. So everybody looked at the project plan? Thoughts, comments? I did send along comments from me, and I did anybody else actually send comments? Because I think this is one of those, we wanted to be included in the process of giving feedback, particularly around, the transportation and parking issues and developments. And very few of us are commenting on anything. And so this is one of those where we have an opportunity. And so Andrew and I thought it would be good to bring this up and maybe send something either as an entire commission or have individuals actually write their comments and send them. I think they're due today. Is that right?
Yes, and actually my schedule was a little off because the packet for council was actually due a couple days ago. So any comments that I get from ETC right now, I'll give to Kerry Teague for him to bring to the meeting, okay. But they won't necessarily be able to be included in the packet.
The upshot of the concern has to do really with delivery vehicles, primarily the Amazons and the UPS and the FedEx that would be inclined to stop in front of the building on Valley View Road, which is actually right on the shared use bike path, the shared on the street bike path. And the developer, actually, it's a lovely development. In my opinion, it's beautiful and really well designed. And that's really the one sticking point for me, because that would send bicyclists further out into traffic. And what you have there is the center left turn lane. So if cars swerve around the bicyclists to avoid them, they're in the center lane. It's not a good scene. So I think those delivery vehicles would have to go to the back of the building.
I had one question. It says that it was going to remove a driveway access to Valley View Road and utilize a shared driveway with 4412 Valley View Road. But 4412 is across the street, and I'm failing to understand how this is possible.
Did I put the address wrong? I put the address wrong. I meant 4415.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Which is another apartment building, right?
I believe so. Yes.
Lori, I really like your, even in reviewing this, I wouldn't have seen that idea about delivery vehicles. So I really appreciate that comment.
That was a Lou Miranda. Lou picked that up in the planning commission meeting.
And as delivery vehicles are becoming more prevalent, and knowing that they are always trying to save steps, unless it is a very easy access point, even if you tell them they have to go around, they won't. So I don't know if there's any way they can create a cutout that just allows for a delivery vehicle to stop that might resolve that issue.
I think to Commissioner Miranda's point about, my understanding is his concern is that conflict between a parked vehicle and a biker. So if my thought is even if there's a turnaround, there's still 2 points then where that delivery vehicle is intersecting with the bike lane.
Yeah, I didn't pick that up from the report. I thought I read it pretty well. I think that's a great pickup by Lou. I think that's a problem. The things I liked about it, the amount of bike parking they have, I think 20 or 21 bike spaces, which is really very good for the number of units that they have. So I was pleased with that part. But I think the issue about the deliveries and ride shares, I think is
yeah. Yeah, I think it would have to be posted no stopping or something.
Mm-hmm. At least according to the no parking signs on our street where the delivery vehicles constantly park there. I
Exactly.
don't know that would help. One other question, how close is the door, the main access door, to the driveway? So if the door is near the driveway where they would be taking packages, they would be encouraged to pull into the driveway. They'd be more likely to want to pull into the driveway if it's close to the door.
Let me see if I can get a sense from that on the sketch plan layout.
It looks like a pretty narrow driveway, but maybe they could make it bigger. Now, if they're parked in the driveway, that could impede parking and people, because the parking's all underground, so you have to zip in and out.
It is.
If they could make that wider, that would be good.
Here, I think I can answer that question. So this is their revised site plan. So here's the driveway off Valley View on the east side. And it looks like based on where they have the lobby labeled, it seems to me like this is the main entrance over on the west side. But it does look like I
would be dropped for residents. That's where the delivery vehicles are going to stop.
It's a lovely proposed building, and in my opinion, that delivery vehicle thing is it's kind of a deal breaker, unless there's a way for them to have a cut in there on the side where the main entrance to the building is.
So the planning commission, the condition that they put on their approval was that the developer provide a physical protection of the bike lane in front of the building. Staff, at this point, what we're recommending to council on Tuesday is that the application shall provide signage to direct delivery or short-term parking on site. In addition to that, staff and the Transportation Commission will review the impacts of off-street versus on-street bicycle facilities adjacent to the site, and staff will review opportunities for implementation along the entire corridor, the corridor being Wooddale to Brookview, where the shared lanes exist. Great. Because the concern was also brought up at planning about whether or not to do just a piecemeal fix in front of this property versus doing something more universal along the whole corridor.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Did you need anything else from us on this?
Unless there were any other comments that the commission wants council to consider on Tuesday.
I guess I just wanted to say real quick, I would support probably some sort of a comprehensive solution if you can get there on the corridor. I mean, if I'm thinking about that correctly, that's from Wooddale toward 100, correct?
That is Wooddale toward Highway 62.
62, yep.
Okay, but I mean, there's quite a bit of potential in that area for it to be multifamily housing or to do other sorts of developments. I know there's at least one large vacant lot in there, and a few others that could probably be redone. So, I don't know what things are zoned, but I feel like there's the potential to do quite a bit in that area.
Anything else? Anyone else? Okay, let's move quickly through our 2020 work plan updates.
Sorry, I'll start sharing again.
I have to put my glasses on to see that.
Sorry, I can zoom in a little bit more.
Okay. Eric, anything new on Clover Ride?
Yeah, they resumed the regular route.
Okay.
So last week. So they're doing more wipe downs inside the bus, but they are on the regular route again.
Great. Thank you.
And I am encouraging that we start doing the meetings with Jan like this over WebEx or something like that, rather than just keep putting them off because of the COVID-19. That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Quick question. Any information about the on-demand service? Is that well received or is it not used very much? Any information there?
I don't think we have any info on it because we have not been having meetings.
I've been trying to get some, but on kind of a perfect storm, Darts is was in the process or may still be in the process of transferring to some kind of new data software. So we are hoping, I'm still pushing to get that data to see what the usage was, but at this point we don't have it.
Okay, initiative 2, review and comment on traffic impact studies with proposed developments. Andrew, is there anything you want to say about that I didn't already say? Like very few of us actually comment.
I guess generally speaking, I've kind of started to develop a template now for what my review of these look like. So I'm going to try to stick to that. Okay. If you have comments or suggestions of better ways to format it or different ways to break it up, I certainly welcome those.
Sure.
And in that format, is your assessment or your recommendation clear? Or are you not making one? I'm just not sure where you are in that.
Yeah, I haven't really talked to Carrie about it specifically, but I'm generally leaning away from making a recommendation. Okay. And more just towards stating the facts.
Okay.
I guess the exception would be I've included some suggestions. For example, the TDM units that I have included in the last couple of reports. I'll continue to include those, but I intend it for that document to be a review, not necessarily a recommendation.
Okay. Okay, and I haven't looked at what your sections might be. Do you have an area that is concerns? Something like that?
Or maybe Nation Commission feedback?
Let me pull up. I would put that if I received any, frankly.
I think we should. I like the idea. I'll work harder at it. I think the timing, and I wasn't
not the right week for me.
I wasn't that comfortable sending my comments directly to the Planning Commission. I thought we'd sort of sort them out here first and then go on from there.
Timing is still an issue, to be fair, and this one was a very short time frame.
Yeah.
So, for example, this is kind of an update of my memo that I had previously sent that includes the Planning Commission conversation, but there's a review of the multimodal facilities. Then I talk about here's where it meets the aspects of the comp plan, living streets plan, small area plan, strictly regarding transportation. Kind of some further analysis of the traffic studies. And then at the bottom, some recommendations regarding TDM. So if I would include a separate section for Transportation Commission comments.
So I sent you comments.
But I got them just after I had to send this in to Carrie.
Did I not send those last week? Everything's a blur. Sorry.
You did, but again, I was off on the timing. I put a deadline for Thursday, and it really should have been sooner than that. So that's on me. But any comments that I get, the comments that I get tonight, I will pass along to Carrie so that he has them for council on Tuesday.
Okay, would you include my comments then in that?
Yes.
That I sent you? Okay, thank you.
Is there any way to time these up so that we get a meeting in so we can discuss it? Because I might have thoughts or opinions or something, but they often change after we have a discussion together.
Well, Bruce, that's kind of that's the whole deal. That's why we're doing it this way, because they meet twice a month. We meet once a month. So that's the whole point of doing this on an ongoing basis.
I do
Sorry.
like the TDM.
Agreed. Okay.
I wasn't supposed to stop sharing.
Initiative 3, which is the TDM policy / ordinance. I think that was in your hands, Andrew.
Yes, and some of that is being reflected in the inclusion in those traffic reviews, those transportation reviews. But I'm still working on kind of formally developing the whole policy.
Okay.
Admittedly, the speed limits kind of took a lot of my attention in recent months, but
I bet
the TDM will be the priority after that.
Okay. Bruce, do you have anything else on that?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Number 5, educational activities. Mindy?
There has been no activity to date in this work plan initiative, and I would like to formally request assistance for either a new commissioner to lead this or co-lead this initiative with me. Discovering my own capacity has not been there to be able to move forward on this item.
Is anybody interested in working with Mindy on this?
No time.
Okay, well, let's just we'll just leave that on the front of the shelf. But we don't have really everybody here. It might be that Jill might be interested or Kirk might be interested. So, and there's no what's the open streets? There's no open streets. So, okay.
Generally, we'd start planning at this time of year, and the speed limit has its own communication plan, and some things might make sense in conjunction with that, but not if it's going to be a while before we do that. So,
okay, traffic safety reports. I don't think there's any reason to. I don't know what to say about that. Yes, we're doing them now. How about that? And then the CIP projects. No news.
I will say the street recons will, the plan is to have them in front of the commission to discuss them in October at the October meeting. And I'll kind of give a preview of the anticipated recon areas in the September meeting.
Hey, Andrew, I had one quick question about that.
Mm-hmm.
As I walk my dog, I occasionally see large swaths of the city where there are blue paint, which I assume represents water lines, and yellow paint, which I think represents sewer lines. Is that like sort of the preliminary engineering stuff for maybe the projects that haven't been identified yet? I was just curious.
Sure. I guess I have to look at a specific area, but yes, generally the blue paint mark is the water line, or the water service, which our public works crews typically go out a couple years in advance of a project to locate those and GPS them so that we have them digitally recorded, because they're not all easily accessible on the surface. The yellow marks, yellow is gas. So that's something that we don't usually locate prior to the project. That's something that's usually located only immediately before excavation is about to occur. But that's also not something that's a private utility, so that's not something that that we locate.
Cool. Yeah, it was just in a section that I don't think I'd seen on a chart before, so it was kind of interesting to see it.
My recollection, particularly with the water services, is that our public works crews are significantly far ahead, like 5 or 6 years ahead in the recon schedule. So that may be why, at least regarding the water services. I'm not sure about why the gas was located. It could also be that there's a break in the area and Public Works is anticipating doing a dig.
Okay, let's move on to our last agenda item, or work item, report, I guess, which is the 2021 work plan development. And I guess the floor is open, or the screen is open for folks to propose work plan, potential work plan items, in addition to the ones that will remain. So as long as we probably have Clover Ride, that'll stay on. Traffic safety reports will stay on. The PAX Fund CIP review will stay on. Does anybody have thoughts
how many
about?
spots are left?
I'm sorry?
How many spots are left?
Well, not very many. And actually it does sort of, you know, maybe we should consider the whole education thing. Is that, Andrew, is that part of our role? I mean, is that a requirement that that's always something on there?
It's not a requirement. It is something that falls within the purview of the commission, but it's not something that you're required to do.
Okay.
So I'm just kind of going to start listing things off as people mention them.
Okay.
I'm going to do one that's not necessarily related to us directly, but it kind of is, and that's organized trash collection.
Interesting.
Because trash trucks put a lot of the damage on the roads. We've got 7 different companies that come through every neighborhood every time. I'm sure nobody really wants to talk about that based on St. Paul's recent experience, but you never know.
Well,
Dude, I get more than that.
Andrew, the review and comment on traffic impact studies, that's probably a recurring.
So I guess before we get too far, I wanted to address a comment that was made at the last meeting regarding some concerns about the workflow or the work plan development process, particularly the timing of the liaison comments and the city manager comments. So I brought it up at our last liaison meeting, and what was generally discussed is that unfortunately there's not enough time in the process for a more back and forward approach. And the way it was explained to me, which I think is kind of an accurate description, it's in a certain way, it's the same way that we treat most of our community engagement, where the residents, in this case, the commission, provides input, staff provides their input, council considers both of those in their decision. Now, not to say that there aren't times where staff makes a recommendation and then the residents want to kind of rebut that recommendation, but there just generally isn't enough time in the process to allow that. But that being said, in my role as a liaison, I will try to be more transparent and vocal about what I see could be potential changes to proposed work plan initiatives.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. I think it was my indelicate question.
It's a valid question.
Other thoughts for work items for next year?
Is TDM done?
TDM?
Is it done?
The plan is to have the policy before council by the end of the year. So by next year, the policy should be in place.
Okay.
There might be, so, let's see. I'll just put it flat out there. I'm sad that this is not an ordinance, but is instead a policy. And so there might be some reason to have TDM continue on in terms of sort of monitoring how it's working and whether or not it at some point should shift to become an ordinance. I don't know, Bruce, do you have thoughts about that?
I think that makes sense, Lori. I think to review the policy and implementation, and as you said, to consider moving it to an ordinance. And I'm not sure if we're the right place for it, but to consider things that the city might do to promote travel demand management in general, like we do, education about traffic safety. Could we do other things there? So I'm not sure. It's not a well formed out idea yet, but I think we maybe put it down there as an idea at this point.
Okay, good. And then Matt, is there, I don't know that it's a work plan item for us, but as part of, I know that you'll talk a little bit about the street funding task force. Is that something that should show up on our work plan, or? I'm not sure.
I don't know that it really needs to show up on the work plan. We could still throw it on there as an idea. For right now, we're just kind of investigating what other cities are doing. We started talking about a few other items in terms of how projects have been selected. Can you guys hear me? I just want to make sure.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm struggling a little bit with my internet connection. So talking about how other cities are doing it. And then, the other challenge, I think the biggest challenge that I think we're going to be dealing with here is changing midstream. So about half the city has already been reconstructed, which means half the people have been assessed already and the other half haven't. So one of the big question marks is, well, how do you make that fair or equitable for the rest of the people, if that makes sense?
Right.
So I don't know. They're looking at franchise fees. They're looking at, in the past, the city has sort of chipped in more and more in a way in an effort to help pay for some of these things. So I don't know to what degree things are going to change. It's an interesting mix. There's some policy wonk people. There's also some people on there that quite clearly just want to avoid an assessment mainly. So it's kind of fascinating. We have an interesting blend of people that are on there. But yeah, we just did our second one the other day. So things are going good on that.
Okay. Well, maybe after you have another meeting or two, you'll have a better sense of whether it should be a work plan item or it just,
Sure.
You're a representative and it's happening.
I mean, I'd be happy to. I'll obviously be reporting every time we come back. We're doing bi-weekly meetings, so it's every 2 weeks. So I'll have another 2 under my belt by the time we get around to you the next time.
Okay.
For right now, it's just sort of been information sharing more than anything and looking at what other surrounding cities are doing.
Okay.
Just out of, from my perspective on that, I will say I had kind of an interesting thought from my old perspective as a lobbyist, because of the half the city having done it and half the city having not. Typically the best solution to some of these things is if everybody is upset. So I'm going to put that out there, and then I'm going to say, I think maybe like a blend would be interesting where you could create some sort of a fund that the city could invest. That would be the monthly fee that everybody would pay, and we would start that immediately. And then you would, for the remainder of the people that still need to do it, they would still be assessed for this round of street reconstruction, so that then in 30 years, we'd have just a pile of money sitting there to redo all the streets. If that makes sense to people.
Interesting.
But I don't know if it's legal. Who knows? It's just me spitballing. I just think it'd be kind of interesting to have an investment pool of funds to handle transportation stuff.
Cool idea. Other work plan items do you want to throw up there?
Did we lose Peter?
I'm here.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
That's weird because I don't see your name up on the who's on the meeting. But okay.
I'm here. My video's not sharing? Well, hold on. My video not sharing? I'm here.
Okay. All right.
I guess, sorry. I was just going to say what I brought up last time about these low speed vehicles or neighborhood vehicles. I think we should, once if indeed they end up lowering the speed limits, those will make a heck of a lot more sense. So I would say, Andrew, you know, as we were talking the other day, I think that's something to put on or however you wanted to put it on or I would suggest to put that on whatever list you said they called it, not something we're working on. But I think if you drop the speed limit to 20 miles an hour, those electric vehicles could be very attractive for the community. But I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't present it now or even spend time on it until we, you know, if we indeed lower the speed limits.
I like having it up there on the list because it may be that the next year is really a year of sort of research and investigation and very little else. But it would be the start.
And it doesn't hurt to have it on the parking lot.
Right. So to speak.
So parking lot isn't related. That's parking lot is the category, right? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, these are items that are considered by the board but are not proposed as part of the work plan. But they could at some point, if there is an initiative in the parking lot, if at some point the year the commission wants to add it to the work plan, it's much easier to do that if it's already in the parking lot versus if it's not.
Last call for other work plan ideas, or we will move on. Going.
So I guess.
Yes.
I guess I'll send out this document that includes the list and the form.
Okay.
Just kind of a reminder of the general schedule. The work plans have to be approved by the end of September. So for us, that means we have to, the commission has to vote on it by September. Oh, I had it and I lost it. September 17th.
Okay.
So I would recommend at the next meeting to maybe start to flesh these out a little bit more.
Okay.
In terms of, these are kind of some of the things to consider. What's the final outcome? You know, is the number of work plans initiatives reasonable? Do they align with city budget goals or comprehensive plan goals, things like that? So like I said, I'll send this document out for commissioners to keep in mind going into the next meeting.
Okay.
Great, thank you. And then Matt, you did your street funding update already, right?
I think so.
Okay. Then we're into staff comments. Oh no, we're in chair and member comments.
I was just going to go alphabetically, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
Mindy?
Further comments?
Mm-hmm. Is that no comments, Mindy?
Sorry, I didn't realize you didn't hear me. No further comments.
Okay. Bokar?
A quick comment here. Andrew, I know last time you were going to look into having some of the staff come and look at that intersection on West Shore and
Hibiscus.
Hibiscus. So
yes,
maybe a quick update on that. I think that falls right into what we discussed this morning. I mean, this tonight, right?
Yes. So that is on Nick's list to get to. He's focusing primarily, or he has been focusing primarily on our required municipal state aid counts of late. But when I last spoke to him, he said he anticipated getting that intersection count done by the end of the month.
Okay. So then, I mean, since we just discussed similar issues tonight, can I make a motion during the comments?
Meeting's not over.
Suppose you can.
Yeah, can I make a motion to add, to make that intersection a four-way stop?
I guess you would be to clarify, you'd be making a motion that the men's
Correct.
making it a four-way or all-way stop.
Yes.
Would that need to be in the traffic safety report?
It wasn't on the report.
I know I'm just looking at like process, because
Yeah,
that's usually what we are making recommendations and things on.
So,
Andrew, I defer to you in terms of the process.
so I guess, yeah, I am also concerned about just kind of the floating placement of this motion. Might I suggest slightly changing it to be that in next month's traffic safety report, staff reevaluate that request, so that the commission next month then can make a recommendation one way or the other.
I think that's a great idea if that's the process. I don't know the process, but yes, absolutely. Let's do that. That's my comment.
Sounds great. Andrew, I don't know who's next.
Peter?
No comment.
Bruce? Bruce, I'm sorry, did you say something?
Bruce, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep. All right. Eric?
No comment.
Matt? Did he hop off? It looks like he left.
It looks like he did.
He was having internet problems.
Tayden?
I have no comment.
Simon?
No comment.
Lori?
I have a couple. They're short. With the France Avenue restriping, which I love, actually. I hear from a resident who's on France, and it's frustrating for them not to be able to park on France, but I love it. But the streets that intersect with France, the residents on those corners need to keep their vegetation trimmed back. And particularly, we have a neighbor that's at 60th and France on the southeast side, who has a hedge along there. But now that the traffic is closer to the side, you can't really look down France and see them coming because of the vegetation. So that might be something that city staff will want to just pay attention to, all those roads that intersect France and the vegetation along the side.
Sure, I can.
Sorry, go ahead.
I can certainly review that with Nick.
That'd be great. And just that the 58th Street project is busily coming along. Super excited about that. It's a mess, but it always is at this point. That's it.
Back to a comment. When you mentioned the France restriping, it reminded me, as I was going down France the other day, someone passed me in the center, that center turn lane.
Take a picture of their license plate from the back.
So something to be mindful of, that may become the new problem. Instead of on the shoulder, they'll pass down the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have gotten that a few times, so we're still reviewing it with the county.
We can't lower the speed limit on that road because it's a county road.
Right, we can't. We can make recommendations to the county, but we can't actually do it ourselves. I will say I had a newer resident, I believe, who was asking why we didn't go with the bump outs that are on Xerxes.
Oh,
so
my gosh.
I informed them of the history about those.
Good.
You said that was it, Lori?
Yeah, that's it. Yep.
Okay. I'll be quick with mine. You already mentioned 58th. 58th and France, that intersection will be closed for a week starting on Monday for utility work. And curb and gutter for that project is anticipated at the end of the month. Valley View Road Sidewalk Phase 3 is 95% complete. I think it looks really nice. There's a lot of big walls there. I'd recommend looking at it if you haven't been there already. Next Tuesday, we're asking council to award construction of shared use path on Tracy Avenue from the roundabout up to Highway 60, up to Highway 62, up to the bridge to fill in that gap. We've got 3 sidewalks that are anticipated to begin construction in August. One is on France Avenue adjacent to the hospital. One is on Vernon Avenue on the south side next to Washburn-McCreevy Funeral Home. And one is on 74th Street east of Bush Lake, kind of right between Public Works and Wooden Hill Brewery. Also on Tuesday, we're asking council to award what we're calling our 2020 pavement rejuvenation project. This is an alternative to seal coating. It's a product that doesn't require loose rock, and it doesn't require us to replace pavement markings. It's a product that soaks into the pavement and pretty much dries clear.
Nice.
We experimented with it last year and got good results, and a number of other local cities have been using it more and more. Woodbury uses it. Richfield has tried it. Eden Prairie is planning to use it. So we're trying a kind of a larger scale demonstration project this year and hoping that is beneficial for us. The commission meetings are so right now the direction is that they're going to stay remote until at least the end of August. So right now they're kind of taking it on a month by month approach, but our next meeting will at this point be remote. Student commissioner applications are closed. We got 53 submissions received.
Wow.
Those interviews will be done virtually by Ron Anderson and a former commissioner, a volunteer. And then the appointments will be made August 18th, orientation on the 25th, and then terms begin September 1st. Unfortunately, this year, because of the pandemic and all the other difficulties, it was decided that the current chairs would not be able to participate in that process. The town talk on my town talk on traffic and transportation is Wednesday, September 16th. So the next meeting, I'll be asking for the commission's thoughts on topics to discuss as part of that. Right now, I'm leaning toward kind of focusing on the city's efforts to reduce traffic or impacts of traffic. So talking about things like the Pen Bike Master Plan, TDM, the EV policy, and speed limits will likely be an important topic. And then last but not least, the Met Council finally approved our 2018 comprehensive plan.
Woo!
So there were some minor changes made to the transportation chapter. Those include they wanted us to add the definition of a transit market area. And they wanted us to add some language about the possibility of additional lanes on Highway 62 and 494. The most recent updated, like the red line graphics and documents are all available on Better Together. And the final step is for council to formally adopt the comp plan, which they will do on August 5th.
That's awesome.
And that's all I got.
And I hate to do this out of order, but I did forget one thing. The bike path that comes from, I don't know, say the promenade that goes across the parking lot where Pinstripes is and goes to the corner.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
The regional trail?
Yep. I think there should be signage there at when you're leaving and entering that the Pinstripes and other business parking lot, that's a bike crossing. Because if you don't know that area, it's really easy to miss that somebody's zipping along on their bike. And there's a lot of traffic that goes in and out of there.
Sure, we can certainly look into that.
Real good.
Thank you.
That's all you have. And I think other than folks to look at the next meeting, which is
August 16th,
20th.
20th, which will be remote, then I think we can take a motion to adjourn.
We adjourn.
Moved and seconded. Andrew, you want to poll the group?
Hadley. Commissioner Aller.
Aye.
Commissioner Kane.
Aye.
Commissioner Lafferty. Aye. Commissioner McCarthy.
Aye.
Chair Richmond.
Aye.
Commissioner Ruthruff.
Aye.
Commissioner Shearer.
Dropped off.
Absent. Commissioner Erickson.
Aye.
Commissioner Vernell.
Aye.
We stand adjourned.
Hey, good meeting, everyone. We're adjourned.
Andrew, if it helps you, there was a note in the chat from Matt that he had to drop off at 8:05, if that helps you for your minutes.
I did see that. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.